Ladies and gentlemen, welcome! I'm Nerdy, and this channel is all about chess. 64 squares of changing your brain. Today, we are looking at what happens when you play while being sick. Yes, last week I was sick, and that's why there was no video. Playing while not fully recovered is not a good idea. My elo dropped off a cliff, just look at it. Luckily, I'm bouncing back and closing in on 1100 again. Let's take a peek at this game, where I completely lose right at the beginning. Take this position in the Scandinavian defense. Here I play a quite dangerous line, taking the poisoned b2 pawn. Now the knight at b5 threatens a fork between the king and my rook. But here I should have played knight to f6. This protects the h5 square so the opponent queen cannot go to h5. Instead, I attack the knight, which looks like a reasonable move. But look at this sequence. That's rough. I never recovered from that. This game continues, but there's a very significant advantage for my opponent. We are not looking any further into this game because it's just totally lost. Just a very defensive game with no prospect. But as you probably gathered, today I have a game that I win. Wait, what? Huh? No? Let's get right into it. Okay, so in this game, I play the English. This is just the main opening I play. So after c4 and knight to c3, I am wondering what my opponent is up to. Because you don't usually see the c-pawn being pushed on move 2. So I'm a bit confused, but I opt to play pawn to d3 to complete my pawn chain. The computer says this is just an okay move. It wants the knight developed or to transpose into a queen's gambit. That's all fine, but I play this instead. Maybe not the absolute best, but good enough. Now after my opponent pushes the d-pawn, I know exactly what they are playing. This is a reversed London, but they haven't moved any pieces yet. They all sit on the back rank. This is a weird way to play. I just take the top of the reversed pyramid. Of course, you can also keep the tension and just play a move like knight to f3. But if the opponent takes and you recapture, the queens are staring right at each other. I don't want to trade queens, so we go back to the game and I take the pawn. My opponent recaptures and now I just develop my knight. Then we get a h-pawn push. My opponent is trying to stop my bishop from developing to g5. I don't really like this move. Some opponents even push both the a and the h-pawn, which is super annoying. But those pawns can also become a target later. Here I think for a little bit. Normally I play g3 and play it like a reverse dragon. But this time I decide to push the e-pawn. I'm going to call this sick brain because it completely blocks my bishop. But honestly, the computer actually likes it better. Strange. Now it is just a developing sequence. The opponent develops the knight to f6 and I play the bishop to e2, so I can castle soon. Then they play bishop to d6, next I castle and the opponent castles. Looking at this position, I feel a little bit cramped because the opponent has more space. Just look at the difference in space. Because I have less space, it's harder to make a good move. Here I consider moving my b-pawn to b3 to open a path for my bishop. However, I realize my knight will no longer be protected. Furthermore, the bishop still could not move to a3 because the opponent bishop protects that square. Instead, I just finished my pawn chain in the center. Now both my opponent and I have this well-known pawn chain towards the middle of the board. Then, black light squared bishop flies in. With both of their bishop restricting my moves, I just develop my queen to the queen side and trying to get some play on that side of the board. But the opponent pawn flies in, cutting off any progress on this side of the board. at least for the queen. Now, while analyzing this game for the video, I think I could have played my a pawn to a4, undermining that pawn. The computer actually gives that move a good rating. In the game, however, I just moved my queen back to d1. It feels a bit passive now that I'm looking at it, but the computer gives it an excellent rating. So it is not really a bad move. I just not like moving the queen to b3 and right back again. The opponent is doing a fine job of restricting my pieces. Then the knight jumps in and my instinctive reaction now is just taking back with my knight. And this is also confirmed by the engine. Excellent move. But my brain just did a waiting move, a3. Nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't help my position much either. After the opponent develops the second knight, then I still take the knight on e4. And now the engine is less of a fan. But I think it is totally reasonable. And the opponent's pawn takes back. Here the evil boss says the opponent has quite the advantage. And after my next move, it gets even higher. But I'm so passive, I don't want to jump the knight back. So I jump the knight to e5. Just holding on for dear life in the position. Let's move a bit forward. I just try to improve my pieces and get more space on the board. And here, after the bishop attacks my queen, I just offer a queen exchange. And my opponent takes it. Now the evil boss spots a cool minus 2.0 in my opponent's favor. Let's analyze this position. How is king safety? Well, both kings are quite safe. Who has the material advantage? Well, my opponent is just one pawn up. But that doesn't say very much at our strength. So, what is better for my opponent? Well, they have more space and their pieces are more active. I say this because, look at this. I move my bishop to e3 and they move the bishop back to g6. And poof! All the advantage is mysteriously gone. So yeah, who knows what the engine was thinking? We just move on with the game. I target the c6 pawn with my rook. And they, of course, defend it. So I prepare a battery to put pressure on that pawn. And the opponent makes a pawn move getting closer to my king. And continuing the theme of this game, restricting the space I have to move. Then they move the bishop back. I have no idea what that accomplishes. Next I push my h-pawn. I don't really like this move, it's just meh. It doesn't accomplish anything. I am analyzing the position now for the video. And now that I'm not sick anymore, I like pushing the d-pawn way better. Then after they play f4, my bishop has a much better square to go to. But none of that happened. After the h-pawn push, their pawn comes in. I put my bishop back and their pawn comes in again, opening up my king. I move my bishop back and the opponent moves their rook. I move my bishop again because it's very passive on the f1 square. I don't know what I was thinking here, it is a weird sequence. Then the opponent attacks my pawn with their bishop. So I of course push it up. I have no idea why the engine finds this inaccurate. Then the opponent moves their bishop to f5. Very confrontational. Now I don't have much choice other than to take. This leads to a sequence of trades. Rook takes, my rook takes a pawn, a free-ish pawn. They take back with their rook, and I take the rook back again. Here I deny the bishop trade, and black attacks my pawn close to the edge of the board. Then we get takes and takes. Here I notice that my king is in more danger than I first realized. The pawn on f3 creates these thorns. taking away some of the escape squares for my king. This gives the king less freedom to move. In this position, my king could only move to f1, but this would be fatal and leads to a straight up checkmate. So I panic a bit and run my rook back. The engine hates it, but I think it's fine. The bishop attacks my king, so it has to move. Now I actually can run to the f1 square, because the bishop blocks the rook that was threatening checkmate. The opponent makes a rook move, cutting off my king. At this point I think the crisis is averted and I move my rook back to attack the pawn. Then you get this king walk. Walk, 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 walk. And I feel confident that I am escaping. After they play bishop to g5, the evil bar shoots into my favor. And then I make the fatal, losing move of this game. King takes pawn. This puts my king directly in line with my unprotected bishop. Loose pieces drop off. And there you have it, a tough game that is ultimately decided by one total blunder. I will just show the remainder of the game. So this was my first video in the series How to Lose at Chess. I hope you liked the video and that you learned something. That is why I share my thought process and the better lines that I should have played. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe and all the rest. It's greatly appreciated. I'm Nerdy and this was Nerdy Thing Chess. I'm out. Bye.